Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome to The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I'm your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. This is Thursday's show. As you guys know, The Process runs every Tuesday and Thursday on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. And on this episode of The Process, I wanted to take a look at Alabama's 2021 wide receiver targets because I feel the wide receiver position will be an interesting one for Alabama in the 2021 recruiting class. So I wanted to break down some of Alabama's targets at that position. But before I get to break down those guys, I wanted to provide you guys with a couple of recruiting updates, keep you guys updated on everything Alabama football recruiting. So with that being said, let's get the process started. I have a couple of recruiting updates to provide you guys with. The first one will take us back to Tennessee as the Volunteers continue to roll on the recruiting trail, picking up another verbal commitment this evening from Terrence Lewis, a 5-star outside linebacker in the 2021 recruiting class, a guy who included Alabama in his top schools list before he announced his commitment to the Tennessee Volunteers. So the Volunteers are continuing to roll on the recruiting trail. I expect them to be involved in a lot of the recruitments that Alabama is involved in the 2021 recruiting class, as they have a lot of mutual targets moving forward in the 2021 recruiting cycle. So keep your eyes on the Tennessee Volunteers as they continue to do work on the recruiting trail. Alabama is also still targeting a 2021 4-star defensive tackle in Katron Evans, who recently posted on Twitter that he really enjoyed a visit to Alabama a couple of months ago. He posted that a couple of days ago, so you know that Alabama is on his mind. Alabama's coaching staff is staying in contact with them. You know Alabama's going to continue to try to keep the pipeline between St. Francis Academy to Alabama open. So Alabama is staying in contact with Katron Evans, a 4-star defensive tackle in the 2021 recruiting class. Alabama's also still after 5-star athlete Quincy McKinstry out of Pinson Valley High School in Pinson, Alabama. This is a kid who's recently seen working out with Justin HUDl, the former Alabama defensive back, and Alabama's 2020 defensive back signing Malachi Moore. When I spoke to Malachi Moore at a 7-on-7 event and during the 7-on-7 circuit going into his senior season, he told me that Quincy McKinstry was like a little brother to him. He loved to compete against him at those 7-on-7 events, and they also went head-to-head in the first game of Malachi Moore's senior season as he played for Trussville High School and they took on Pinson Valley. So Quincy McKinstry is hearing from Malachi Moore, of course. He's also probably hearing from Quentin Williams, a guy who we worked out with recently, the former Alabama defensive tackle and current New York Jets defensive tackle. So a lot of things are working in favor for Alabama in their push for Quincy McKinstry, the 5-star athlete in the 2021 recruiting class. Alabama's also recently extended a couple of offers. One of those offers went out to Gunnar Givens, a 2022 4-star offensive tackle, and another 2022 prospect in Ene White, a guy who I will catch up with on touchdownalabama.com site as I get a chance to interview him. You guys check out those articles on touchdownalabama.com soon. Those are the updates I want to provide you guys with. We're going to dive right into breaking down Alabama's 2021 wide receiver targets. I think the wide receiver position will be an interesting one for Alabama in the 2021 recruiting class for several reasons. We all know that Devontae Smith will most likely move on to the NFL at the end of this season and will go on to possibly be a first rounder in the NFL draft. Jalen Waddle will be eligible to declare for the NFL draft. If he has a huge junior season, expect him to move on to the NFL at the end of next season as well. And Tyrell Shaver is a guy who Alabama is hoping will take the next step in his senior season. Is another guy who can make the jump to the NFL if he has a pretty productive senior season. So when you look at those guys who are eligible for the NFL draft, guys who have redshirted like Tyrell Shavers, guys who are eligible and who could take the next step and move on to the NFL draft, Alabama could possibly lose 3 to 4 guys at the end of next season if guys like Slade Bolden just happen to step up in Alabama. He wants to move on to the next level. So it's just a lot of possibility Alabama's coaching staff just has to look at when you look at Alabama's current roster, and that's Nick Saban said after Alabama wrapped up their 2020 class, they like to do things 2 years in advance, which is why they picked up those 3 wide receivers in the 2020 class just in case they lost 3 guys at the end of next season. So Alabama's coaching staff is always thinking 2 steps ahead, as Nick Saban said, 2 years ahead of what their roster could look like in those upcoming seasons. So Alabama's coaching staff is still thinking with their heads and making sure Alabama's recruiting efforts are in place. And I wanted to look at Alabama's wide receiver position because I think this is a position where Alabama will look to land 3 to possibly 4 guys, but I think they're going to stay in between that 3 range, try to stay in that 3 range, pull in 3 wide receivers in this 2021 recruiting class. And there are a lot of targets still on the board, a lot of guys who are still considering Alabama, and I just wanted to take a look at some of their more interesting targets. And the first guy I want to talk about is Troy Franklin, a wide receiver out of California. Troy Franklin is the first guy I want to talk about, a 2021 wide receiver out of California. And if there was ever a year where Alabama could land a California wide receiver prospect, it will be this recruiting cycle after they landed Bryce Young in the last recruiting cycle. Of course, he was a 5-star quarterback and a California product as well. And also Alabama landing a guy like Bryce Young, an elite quarterback, a guy who has the chance and the potential to be a really great quarterback at the college football level. A lot of wide receivers in the 2021 recruiting class is looking at that. You know, Troy Franklin is a fellow California prospect. But when you look at Franklin on the field, this is a kid who's a very lengthy kid, a guy who's tall and he kind of has a lanky build at the moment, but he's a playmaker, a guy who his coach wants to put the ball in his hands a lot, including getting the ball with the jet sweeps. And you want to give the ball, especially a guy at the wide receiver position, when you give him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, you know that he's a playmaker, a guy you want to get the ball to in the open field. So I think he's a pretty nice kid, a guy who has some nice routes at the moment, which is something you like to see out of a high school wide receiver. He did include Alabama in his top 6, along with Oregon and Washington, USC, LSU, and Arizona State. Alabama and LSU were the only 2 SEC schools included in that top schools list, and were the only 2 schools that were not on the West Coast as well. So he's still looking at some southern schools, with Alabama and LSU still being in the mix. So Troy Franklin is another one of Alabama's unique wide receiver targets in the 2021 recruiting class. Mario Williams, a 2021 wide receiver out of Florida, is another guy to keep an eye on. This is a guy who has Alabama in his top 5 at the moment, along with Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, and Florida. So Alabama is still involved in his recruitment. When you look at his game film, this is a guy who could possibly play the slot wide receiver position at the next level with a short stature, a guy who can get the ball in between the zone, give him the football in open space and watch what he does with this speed. A guy with a lot of potential, could be a playmaker at the next level. So that's why Alabama and all those other schools are after Mario Williams. But when you look at Alabama recruiting wide receivers from the Sunshine State, you know not to count Alabama out with the track record they have with guys from the state of Florida, producing guys from the state of Florida and moving them on to the NFL. They moved Jerry Jeudy onto the NFL for him to get drafted by the Denver Broncos in NFL in this past NFL draft. They also moved Calvin Ridley on to the Atlanta Falcons. They helped Amari Cooper get to the NFL, get drafted by the Oakland Raiders, and now he's playing for the Dallas Cowboys. So Alabama has a good track record with wide receivers from the state of Florida, and they have had a lot of success recently with recruits from the state of Florida as well, picking up a verbal commitment from HUDl in the 2021 recruiting class, and also picking up signatures from Thaiu Jones-Bell, a 4-star wide receiver from Florida, and also picking up a signature from Trayshawn Holden, a 4-star wide receiver who's originally from Kissimmee, Florida. So Alabama is going to try to continue to build that pipeline from Florida to Alabama. Keep that pipeline going, because I think it's already built with the amount of success they have had, but keep that pipeline going, and I think Mario Williams will hear a lot of that from Alabama's coaching staff. Malcolm Johnson is another guy who I brought up on the last episode. The process is speedy wide receiver who Alabama has been in contact with a lot over this recruiting dead period. They are hoping to get him on campus hopefully this summer. This is a guy who's from the DMV area. Alabama has had some success in the DMV area. The Maryland product told me that he was really impressed with Henry Ruggs getting drafted as the first wide receiver off the board, showing that the NFL is transitioning to more of a speedier league when it comes to the wide receiver position. They want guys who have a lot of speed lining up out wide, and I think that's something that really impresses Malcolm Johnson, a guy who runs track, a guy who really feels that his speed is his strength on the football field, a guy who runs a sub 11 in the 100-meter dash, a guy who once ran a 10.3 in the 100-meter dash, 10.3 seconds. So he's a very fast kid, and it shows on the football field. He's a guy who can create space with the ball in his hands and really can run away from defenders with this breakaway speed, and I think he's really impressed with Henry Ruggs, and he's also really impressed with the way Alabama used their wide receivers. He liked the way Alabama got the ball into Henry Ruggs' hand, and liked the way they were able to show off his speed, and I think he sees that Alabama can allow him to do that at the next level as well. So Malcolm Johnson out of Maryland, hopefully Alabama will get him on campus this summer, is another wide receiver I will keep an eye on. Brian Thomas out of Louisiana is a guy you probably don't hear much about, but Alabama is still recruiting him at the wide receiver position. A guy who stands at 6'4", so he can be a defensive mismatch outside. A guy who has experience playing on both sides of the ball, so he's going to be aggressive, having experience at that safety position. I think he brings that to the wide receiver position on the football field as well. A guy who can be a deep threat down the field with this long body and his ability to get free with his route. So I think this is a kid to keep an eye on. This is about as most likely going to go down to LSU and Alabama. That Alabama is not just going to come into the state of Louisiana without LSU trying to keep their guy at home. So Brian Thomas is a guy I would keep an eye on, an aggressive wideout who really has experience, and an athletic kid who can play on both sides of the ball at the next level, possibly, because I think he's such an aggressive kid at that safety position. But most schools see him as a wide receiver. So Brian Thomas is the last guy I would bring up as far as Alabama's wide receiver position is concerned. Of course, Alabama is still recruiting multiple guys at the wide receiver position, other guys who I've not said, but these are 4 guys I would just keep an eye on at the wide receiver position for Alabama in the 2021 recruiting class at the moment. That would do it for this episode of The Process. As always, thank you guys so much for joining me on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe to Touchdown Alabama on YouTube. Subscribe to touchdownalabama.com. With that subscription, you'll be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles. You'll also be able to get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue. So be sure to subscribe to touchdownalabama.com. Download the Touchdown Alabama app. It is located in the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store. So be sure to download that so you can stay updated on everything Alabama football, recruiting, and everything Alabama football. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.
Process.